Okay, well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to Punch Kick Choke Chat. These acting types, them being Grandmaster Jeff Speakman, who is supposed to be on tonight, but he just got stuck. He legitimately got stuck, and so we're gonna reschedule him for the end of August. And also, Sean Benson, being a movie star, I guess, is not easy for either of them to schedule their lives as it is for a martial artist. So tonight's going to be just myself, Sensei Legacy, and Sensei Suino, and we're going to hope that you're going to ask some questions because we're winging it here. And listen, we are always supportive of our guests and our hosts when they can't be here because things are going on. That's why there's more than one of us on the show. So, if you're watching tonight, if you like previous episodes or you like this episode or you like future episodes, please make sure that you check us out on YouTube or on any of the streaming platforms and give us a like or a follow. And if you wanted to be like next level, suggest us to other people, other martial artists that you know, and share our content out. When you see the posts, hit the share or like button. It really helps us a lot. Tonight I'm here with my two instructors, and we were like, what do we do? And I said, I think it's going to be a student asks the senseis questions type of a night. But we'll probably end up going around the horn a lot. And I just want to say, I've been doing such cool stuff with Sensei Legacy. And Sensei Legacy and I just spent the whole week together at Camp Bushi. We had a bounce back year where camp never had less than like 35 people in camp. And sometimes we had even approaching 40 people in camp, which was awesome. And I'm really excited because tomorrow I jump in the car and I head to Ann Arbor to do the annual Crucible, 12 hours of training, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. with Sensei Suino. So I'm going to kick it over to Sensei Suino now because I think he's going to have a lead-off question for us to get into.
I am. I just want to warn you, folks who are watching us live on Zoom, we would like a question from you tonight. Since we're filling in for A, the missing guest, and B, a missing host, after we go around a little bit, what we're going to do is reach out to you guys. We want you to have a question. I think Andrei Sedashev is going to ask you that as well. If you're willing to come on, let us know. But it doesn't have to be on camera. If you just want to ask a question and not come on camera, that's fine too. I know we got some great people on the call. I know my lovely wife, Pamela Swino's on the call. One of my most experienced senior and talented students, Daniel J. Holland III, is on the call. Super fan, Big Al Panakia, former PKCC guest and judo master, is on the call. And of course, in the legacy tradition, I know Christiana Landolt's on the call, and I'm sure that she has a good question, and it would be really embarrassing if she did not. I'm going to kick this off with a question for us to go around on. I am going to ask this in all sincerity. What is the hardest martial arts experience you've ever had? And you can run with it any way you want, whether that means hardest physically, hardest spiritually, the thing that brought you closest to breaking, the thing you were most scared about. What is the hardest martial arts experience you've ever had? Randy, does something come to mind to you? I'm going to go to you first.
Yeah, the first thing that popped into my head right away, since is my black belt grading. It was tough. Our black belt gradings in Legacy Shredder are hard gradings, especially for black belt. We don't give away any ranks. I know you don't in JMAC as well. Since I know there's no like just, hey, here's a yellow belt and you just throw it to them across the room. No, it was hard. So, there were it starts months out from the grading, just so people can get a flavor of this. Months out from the grading, the candidates for black belt have to meet with Sensei Legacy for private lessons. Those private lessons are not easy. Right? They're very demanding. There's also no like, oh, you're doing this really well. It's mostly what you're not doing well and what you have to fix in order to achieve the level. And it's a lot of, no, you're not doing it. I remember one time where the group of people that I was with testing for black belt, where literally for an hour, we didn't get through the first kata. The very first kata we learned. Because every time we would get, one of us would mess it up, since they would say, stop, start over again. And then we would start going again. And then you get a little farther, stop. You did this, start over again. So there's this group pressure. I went away with Sense Legacy the week before my black belt grading to Rimouski and had lots of private lessons on the beach. That made me feel marginally more secure about going to the grading until I realized what the grading was going to be. And then I instantly got afraid again. So came in, there were 12 of us, had to do all our basics for like 45 minutes or an hour. Then we had to do some katas together. So groups of katas together, much in the tradition of Iaido Sensu Suino, where, people go out together and do things. But then as you get to the higher katas, the groups are getting smaller until in the end, you're doing like 3 or 4 katas solo in front of the panel. All the while, these high ranking black belts are asking you all kinds of questions. Some things as simple as, hey, Randy, what's your postal code? And you're like, I don't know my postal code. Like I can't think of it right now. Right. And then the fighting starts. Oh, sorry. Then we had to demonstrate bunkai from katas. Sensei would just pick katas and say, you now have to go through this kata with this black belt and that partner, and you have to demonstrate all the applications you can think of out of that kata. Then the fighting started, right? So you're already exhausted and the fighting was, you go in the ring and it's basically like a Shark Tank experience. People start coming in the ring. I'm pretty handy and pretty tough. I did pretty good for like my first 4 fights. Then my 5th, 6th, and 7th fight, I was like not doing as good. And then 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12 were like a beating where Sensei wouldn't let you out of the ring until you scored 1 or 2 stopping techniques that would end the fight. So you're taking a pounding maybe for 3 minutes, 4 minutes. Finally, you'd muster up enough energy to throw 1 reverse punch. It would land hard and he'd say, okay, that guy's out of there. When it was all said and done and I came out, Sensei said, you can leave the room now if you want, Randy, go out the back door. So I went out the back door and leaned over the gate of the YWCA and was crying and almost throwing up and bleeding. All of the stuff was like coming out of my face onto the ground. It was super hard. I can remember it vividly today. It was a hard day. It was a really hard day. I will say there was no time when I thought I was going to quit because I just trusted the people around me that they knew better than me. And I just had to go along for the ride here. And people will say, oh, what's the value of that? I will tell you the world was different the next day I walked into the dojo after that grading. The world was a different place. And I was a different human being or a different animal, however you want to look at that. When Sensei said, Randy, you're up. Okay, you're fighting that one guy there. You're like, just one person? All right, I could take a beating for like one person. Even if they're better than you, you're not afraid to fight them because you're like, I can take a beating from this person. Right? So that was my hardest, and that's a glimpse into what a legacy Shorin-ryu black belt looks like. And honestly, that's why I feel super proud to stand next to anybody from legacy Shorin-ryu with their black belt on, because we all go through that test. My daughters went through that test. All my black belts went through that test. That's why I'm really proud to be a legacy Shorin-ryu black belt and stand with those other black belts.
Amazing. Amazing. Hanshi Legacy, what is the hardest martial arts experience you've ever had?
You're gonna laugh. I got to give you 2 because one is ridiculous.
Okay.
I think the toughest thing I ever had to go through was at the induction at the Black Belt Hall of Fame. I had to give a speech. That was, to me, that was the worst. All the beatings and everything else I took was okay. So, but there was a time where things went a little rough for me. I had been a 4th dan for 15 years because I never had a sensei at that time. I was looking for a sensei. And so Ron Yamanaka and Cesar Bukowski decided that they were going to help me out, and they got Varesa, Sensei Varesa, who was a 9th dan from Iran. And he had just recently came into Canada, and he had his son with him and a bunch of these guys from his dojo, I guess. And he put me through a pretty good test. People from Iran don't have things easy. So I think that things were pretty rough at the time because he was, he was just because of being from that country, things are just not easy. So put me through all my basics, made me do all my katas, never made any comments, never smiled, just stared at me like I was an idiot. And then it came to the fighting part of it. And he had brought some students. I'm not a very big guy. I'm 5'7". I weigh 180 pounds, something like that. So I'm not a very big guy. There was some big guys there. And I quickly ran to my books here. And Cesar Bukowski was the referee. And this is what Cesar Bukowski said. Grading took place in the dojo of Ron Yamanaka and was presided over by Brad Veresta from Wuko, a ninth Dan newly arrived from Iran. All I can say is that the sparring matches took a very aggressive tone. The Iranian black belts made heavy contact over and over again until Hanchi Legacy was forced to stop matters by breaking Mr. Veresta's student's nose. It was pure self-defense. That was probably one of the toughest times. It lasted a little bit longer than reading this, right? It was so. That was
and I
probably,
think since Legacy, I think that was the first time that Veresta smiled in your grading, right?
yeah. Apparently, the people that were with me said the guy never smiled one time. He said he watched the fight. He was, he was intent, like he was watching the fighting and everything. And then the very last guy, it says one of his students, it might have been his son. And then we're all like 6 foot something guys. And finally I decided, okay, I'm not going to get graded. And I punched him in the face.
And Veresta smiled.
Yeah, and he smiled and gave me my fifth Dan.
Perfect. What a great story.
But still, I was more scared at the Hall of Fame doing a speech.
You have to answer your own question, Sensei Serino. Obviously, you can't just skip out of answering this question.
I have had scarier experiences, but I think the hardest martial arts experience I ever had, the experience that required the most grit, was the week I spent at judo camp in Colorado Springs at the United States Judo Institute. Sensei Walter Todd asked me to go out and help him teach. And so Colorado Springs is home to the Olympic Training Center. And we did 3-a-days for a week. And I was also preparing for my, I can't remember, Shodan or Nidan exam in karate. So we would do a 2-hour workout in the morning, and then we had a cafeteria card. And so we'd do a 2-hour workout, we'd go eat. Then we'd come back and we'd do a 2-hour workout and we'd go eat. And then we had a little bit of time off in the afternoon, and I'd go to the park and practice my katas to get ready for my karate exam the next week. And then we'd come back in the evening, we'd have a 2 or 3 or 4-hour training session. So 6 or 7 days in a row, we're training probably 8 to 10 hours a day in judo. And it's guys and gals between the ages of 18 and 40, maybe. This was 1980 something, 84, maybe. So I'm 24 years old. And it was just the physically hardest week I've ever experienced in my life, because you train really hard in judo. Everybody's gunning for the favor of the sensei. The sensei doesn't care. He wants you to work hard. You go eat. You don't have time to rest much. maybe you get a shower, 20-minute nap, you go back in there. And, by the end of the first day, you're just ragged out. Everything's tired, sore. It takes effort to do everything. And that's how we were for the whole week. Just achy, sore, never felt like you had any energy. And then, on day 2 in the evening I think it was day 2 or 3, this guy walks in the room and he's the top US contender and he's the top Olympic team member in US judo. And so after warming up, everybody has to fight him. So you got to fight this guy. They were short fights. And then, the next day he brought in 3 people that were at the Olympic Training Center that weren't top, but they were, Olympic hopefuls. And it went like this for the whole week. So I don't know what it's like to go through basic SEAL training or basic Army training, but it just kind of reminds me of that because we weren't sleeping much. We were eating, I probably was eating 15,000 calories a day, but we were just training judo so hard. Your skin is raw from the judo gis. Yeah, so it was just a week of extreme physical training. I learned a few things, mostly about how to get my ass kicked and get back up. But it was a great experience. And then, was back in Michigan for a week and had to take my, I can't remember whether it was a Shodan or Nida exam, but happily passed that exam in Shorin Karate. So yeah, crazy experience. And I believe we have a frozen Sensei Dauphin again. So hopefully he'll pop off and come back. So now it's a rough night, Hashi. It's down to you and me.
The old guys.
The old guys, thank you. Hanshi, do you have a question that you and I can kick around a little bit while we wait for Sensei Dauphin to return?
I was just, I didn't really have anything. There's 2 questions I was going to ask. I was going to say, do camps bolster your martial arts? Like when people go to camps, and are they just going for, or does it change you as a martial artist at all? Are camps worthwhile? Or seminars and stuff like that? Because a lot of times when you go to seminars, it's not from your style. Like if I went to one of your camps, it would be something else. Of course, if I went to one of your EI camps, I would have to say yes, because you always have very good EI camps, and I do EI as a martial art. So you think it's worthwhile going to camps, paying all that money, and does it change? Do you learn something in 3 hours? Does it change you as a martial artist?
So, Hanshi, are you talking about 3-hour camps? Or are you talking about week-long camps? Is there
Any camps?
Yeah.
Any camps at all?
I think it does. I think it does help. You learn new forms maybe that you don't know, or you learn some new fighting techniques. And the other thing is there's just something about the essence of people, right? The way they move is different. And even if, let's say I train in Goju Karate, which I do for 10 years or whatever, and then I go to a camp and I'm training with somebody who's good, but maybe has a different emphasis than my sensei, I feel like I get something out of that. I go to your fighting seminars, Hanshi, and 100% get something out of those. Every time I go, I get something out of it. We practice it at JMAC, and I'm getting better and better, and my students are getting better. So I personally think that yes, going to seminars and camps, obviously, if it's a good instructor, and if you pay attention in camp and then you practice the stuff you learn, 100%, I agree, you do get something out of it.
Well, I sort of agreed with that because when I met you, I was just going to a seminar, and I had the good fortune to train with Sensei Yamaguchi, your teacher. And as a matter of fact, when I was there and he was teaching, the rule was that there were like 4 or 5 instructors there, and you had to, after every hour, you had to change and go to different places. And I asked the person who was running it, I was impressed. There was something about Yamaguchi Sensei. I'll tell you what it is in a second. I asked if I could not move. I want a special permission to just stay in that one ring. He looked like a Japanese, like my dad, a Japanese, my father. He had the glasses. He was a slim man like him. His face was the same and everything. And then I was looking for someone to introduce EI into my dojos in Canada. So then I saw you come out and do some demos and some teaching. And as you know, I asked you to come to Canada and start teaching here. So that actually changed the face of our dojos because we now have that art. Randy is a fourth dan in it, and so sometimes it's worthwhile. Sometimes your life has changed in a second. Depends on. Sometimes it takes you 20 or 30, but then all of a sudden something happens and it changes your life.
Well, yeah, I mean, it changed my life too, right? You opened up Canada to me, and I've been traveling to Canada ever since, and teaching all sorts of dojos and have lifetime friends.
Yeah.
All came out of that moment. It's a wonderful thing. Randy, Hunchy asked if going to seminars and camps is worthwhile, and if so, how does it, what does it do? How does it change us as martial artists?
I really like going to seminars and camps. Lately, I'm mostly teaching at them. I will say that I've gone to some where, both you, and Sense Legacy primarily have always been really good about when I reach out and say, hey, there's this Hanshi coming and they're going to be in Kitchener. And, I remember one time Sense Legacy saying, you can go if you want to, but you're not going to get anything out of that. And I'm not going to name the person's name, but I went and I didn't, right? And they're a really big name in martial arts. So all I can say is I was on the floor with this really big name. The guest tonight that was supposed to come on, Grandmaster Jeff Speakman, I went to a seminar at James's dojo a little while ago. Really, Christine and I went to it. My wife, Christine, and I went to it and trained. We were partners. It was really fun to be with her and have that experience. So that's one of the things I like about seminars is when you go with your tribe of people, you all kind of get bonded together a little more. Some people think, that was horse shit. Some people really like it, but everybody kind of bats it around and gets a little closer. Again, as Sense Legacy said, I started learning EI in a seminar format and now just am enamored with it. Can't stop doing it. But I've met some really amazing martial artists at seminars too. Like, in our first group of 3 people that we had on, which was you, Sensei Suino, you, Sensei Legacy, and Hanshi Dan Anderson. We met Dan Anderson at a seminar. And it was a similar experience to Sensei Legacy. He's a good fighter. I wanted to be a good fighter at that time, and I stayed with him. He actually admired my techniques, right? I admired his techniques. And there's a couple of things he showed me back then when I was like 26, 27 that still work really well today when I'm doing Jiu Kumite. So I think it depends who the instructor is, how you approach it. But besides being out some money, if it was a shitty instructor, there's not really much of a downside to going to camps and seminars, I don't think, right? Because if nothing else, you leave with your eyes a little more wide open about the person and what they do. And yeah, that's my take on it.
Love it. Love it. Hey, everybody. If you're watching live with us, please know that our scheduled guest, Grandmaster Jeff Speakman, was unable to make it. So that's part 1. Part 2 is our most famous host, the movie actor Sean Benson, is tied up on a movie set, so he can't make it either. And hopefully the internet troubles of Sensei Dauphin are over and he can stay on there. So we're winging it tonight, but this is a great conversation already. And here, this is the thing, folks, if you're watching, we need your questions. 2 questions have come in. We'll get to those in a little bit. But anybody else who's watching, we'd love to have your questions. Those of you, I texted a few of you earlier, and hopefully you can either text me back, send me a Facebook message, or use the chat button down at the bottom of your screen on this Zoom call and send us your question in that way. If you are on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button, like, share. It does a lot to help us. And then listen, if these interviews are any value to you, please watch them. Watch hours are really important in the whole scheme of things for us. And we'd be really grateful if you'd watch our shows, our episodes, and always send in comments, questions, and suggest future guests. We love having you as part of this big family, and tonight is no exception. So we'd love to hear your questions. Randy, why don't you do a quick round of introductions? It's going to be a short one, and then we'll start going into some guest questions and push our own questions forward as well.
So the introductions of my teachers, Sensei Nicholas Suino, 8th degree black belt in Mukso Jigden Ishinryu Iaido, multi-time Japanese champion in that art. First Caucasian to be in Japan and win those divisions because of his exalted training from his exalted teacher, Grandmaster Mijin Yamaguchi. Also recently promoted 7th dan in judo. So we really like when Sensei Legacy and I really like when he wears his red and white belt now, because we all get to wander around with all the red on our belts. Also black belt in karate, black belt in jiu-jitsu. The one thing I say about Sensei Suino often is, if you've seen anybody do anything at the highest level, Wayne Gretzky play hockey, Pele do soccer, Pavarotti sing, Sensei Suino is that way with a sword. He is as good with a sword as anybody is at their best thing, at the apex. That's my introduction for Sensei Suino, and I mean it wholeheartedly. I'm still inspired by him every time I step on the floor and watch him do EI and martial arts in general. I'm also joined by Hanshi Gary Legacy, who I don't really call Hanshi. I call him Sensei. Everybody else can call him that. I've always called him Sensei. I'm always going to call him Sensei. He is a 10th dan in Shorin-ryu Karate. He's also a 10th dan in Hakutsuru, Matsumura Hakutsuru. He's had some of the most incredible instructors throughout his martial arts life. He started with Harold Warden, who is kind and smart enough to recognize the talent that Sensei Legacy had and send him off to Benny Allen. He trained with Benny Allen, I would say, as an uchideshi. Like, Benny Allen lived with him for a while. Benny Allen, in the end, claimed that, School Batrack and Sensei Legacy were two of his only students, true students. And I believe that our fighting prowess and the power of the Legacy Shorin-ryu punch comes from Benny Allen. And if you've ever been punched by Sensei Legacy, you might think, well, he's a little older now. Maybe he slowed down. I can set it up for you. He can punch you if you want. You won't like it. Okay. But after Benny Allen, he moved on to train with Richard Kim Sensei, who I believe gave Sensei Legacy that classical mindset, that love of history, the dojo etiquette. All of those things came through Master Kim. And most recently, he's training with Hanshi Anthony Sandoval, who I have had the privilege of having many hours of instruction from. Great man, amazing martial artist. And if you want to think of this is what I will say about Sensei Legacy. It's like Benny Allen created an engine. Richard Kim put a body around it of a nice car. And then Hanshi Sandoval came along and said, hey, you don't have to just drive that car on the road. You can take it through a field. You can drag race it on a strip. You can go down a dirt road with it, and kind of got him to do all these things. Sensei Legacy is the most amazing martial artist I've ever seen in my life. I love him with all of my heart. He has known me longer than my dad, and he's rapidly approaching knowing me longer than my mom. He's been there for every single thing that's been important in my life since I was 18 years old, and gives me a great sense of security to know in this life that if I lost everything, I only have to go to his door and knock on the door, and he's going to take me in, and I've got a place to go and start rebuilding everything all over again with support. That's my introduction for Sensei Legacy. I'm so proud to be both of your students. I love where life has taken us and where we're going together with this. So this is my introduction for my teachers.
And let me just shed a little light on you as well. Everybody knows who Sensei Randy Dauphin is. Happily, he started as my student. So in private life, I can just call him Randy. But he is also one of my karate teachers. I am a rabid fan of the Legacy fighting style, and I'm happy to say I've gotten a little bit good at it. because of the time I've spent with Hanchi, Gary Legacy, and the time I've spent with Randy. But Randy and I, we not only train in Iaido and karate together, we do a little rolling, judo/BJJ rolling together. We do tons of fitness activities together. But I think the most important thing we do together is that we conspire to become better. We drive each other to become better, better physically, better parents, better business people, better students, and better at building this thing that we're involved in, this really cool, decades long, build events, go to other people's events, support them. And, when they say it's better to burn out than fade away, I hope I hope we both lived 150 years old, but when 150 comes, if we're exhausted, it'll be well earned. And I'm really glad you're on this path with us, Randy. It makes this whole thing a lot more fun.
Thanks, Sensei. We talked about it. The relationships are truly the most important things you have in your life, and the mindset. Those two things will take you farther than anything.
We have a few questions coming in. If you don't mind, I'll turn to them. We got a fair amount of Iaido related stuff. But I'm going to turn this around a little bit. The question from John Ryan is for me, but I'm gonna ask you guys to weigh in on on your thoughts. The question is, he's curious if Suino Sensei, has noticed any changes or the evolution of the Iaido that I first learned and the Iaido that I do now. Yeah, John, thank you so much for that question. 100%, it has evolved. So as a classical martial artist, it's my job to retain the teachings of my instructor and the core aspects of that. So I do the same waza that Yamaguchi Sensei taught me, and I maintain the same core values. Structure is the primary power source, that we do it intently with our mind, body, and spirit. But I started, the first time I did Iaido under recognized instructor was, I think 1987 in Vegas with Yamaguchi Sensei. And so I've been doing it a while, and I've put in thousands of hours, and I've taught hundreds or thousands of Iaido students. And I have reflected deeply on what we do and what has value and what I think could be improved. So I think I understand power sources better. I think I understand the connection between breathing and mindset and execution of the sword better. I think I understand better how to have energetic control of a room, if that makes any sense. Has it evolved? 100%. Do I still believe that I am practicing the Iaido of Yamaguchi Sensei has taught to me? 100%. Hanchi Legacy. So John Ryan asked that question, right? If I've known any changes or evolution of Iaido. Hanchi, you and I have been training Iaido, on and off since that fateful day in 1980 1990 or whenever it was. Have you noticed changes in Iaido? What do you see differently than you did in those days?
To be realistic, I'm not in a position to say anything there, but I will add that Sensei Suero was Zen in practice when you see him do EI. I just, the same with Sensei Yamaguchi. You followed a good path there, and I'm taken aback by that. Not many people are in that level of doing their art, and that's like I actually can't think of anybody else that I've seen do their art like you do, EI.
Isn't it incredible? Like when you walk into a dojo, it doesn't have to be an amazing dojo, right? Like you could walk in any dojo, and I was just lucky enough to have an introduction to this guy that turned out to be like extraordinary, right? And I just think back on it and I go, what a gift. Like, how did that happen,
That's the seminar thing. That's the seminar thing, or the camp thing. You just happen to go in and luck in, so that they're actually very good to attend, even if
Yeah.
if you have to do 20 or 30 to get one good one. Yeah.
Great point. Randy, what have you seen? How do you think Iaido, as you know it, has evolved in the last 30 years?
It's a great question. And I'm gonna make a bold statement. You can correct me if you would like to, Sensei. I think of your EIDO students. I know Miller's gone to a couple seminars. I know he's gone to like London, England. But independently in Canada, I've gone to quite a few different things here, competed in different tournaments, gone. And I noticed quite a difference between the Ishinryu Iaido that we do under Yamaguchi and some of the other people who train it. I'll just say it that way. And so I haven't seen a huge evolution in our system from the way you've taught it to me, but I see a lot of differences in other instructors, and quite honestly, a lot of them I don't like. I don't like what I see in some other instructors in their Iaido. It seems fairly cosplay to me. They don't look like a deadly swordsman to me. Just my opinion on it. On the evolution side of it, I do like that the group of five, the five rings, as you call us. When we get together and we train, usually when we leave the room, there's been some minuscule evolution of our art as we get together and discuss things and talk about things. And it might not be a visible thing that changes. I just want to throw that out. Sometimes it's like your feet are in exactly the same position, but where you're generating power from is slightly different, or there's just a slight tweak of an angle of a blade or something like that. And I think I'm really blessed to have that group of five people to be able to bounce this stuff off, because I don't think any one of us would get as good as we're getting without all of us together working on it. So if you're going to ask me, oh, we draw the sword totally different, or we put our feet totally different, the answer is no. But there's lots of little tweaks we have collectively made together through discussion and training that are now being passed on I pass them on to my students when we come back every time. And I will share one final proud moment. I remember the first time I brought Christine to your dojo, and she sat and watched you and I and Miller and Holland and Spangler do the entire system. She just sat there quietly and we did all of the waza. We did all of it. And as we were leaving, I remember you looked at her and said, I know you don't know what you just saw, but you're never going to see 5 Iaido practitioners training that system together in your life ever again at that level. And that was pretty cool.
That is cool.
That's where I take it.
Wonderful. Excellent. Excellent. Hey, just chiming in again for our late arrivals. Thank you so much for coming. I've seen some of you send questions in. I just sent a chat into Sensei Knispo, who's joined us late. Sensei, we've had a few quirks along the way tonight. We'd love to have a question from you as we go forward. Randy, I sent over a question from Holland Sensei. I don't know if you saw that yet, but
is it on? Did you send it in the group chat, Sensei, or did you send?
I sent it in to you as a Facebook message. If you want to tee that question up, or I can ask it if that makes things easier.
Oh, I can do it.
We're multimedia tonight. We're cell phone, Facebook, Zoom. I don't have a pager, so don't use that. If anybody has a BlackBerry, you can text us on a BlackBerry.
Okay, so from Sensei Holland Sensei, who I just got to say, he's another guy. I fucking love that guy. And he's definitely at the apex of every martial artist I've ever met in my life. He just does you can be on, we joke about this, but it's a joke that's true. You can be on your back and he can be on top of you, and he's still got better balance than you do while you're laying on the ground and he's on his feet. He's crazy. He's phenomenal. So Holland says, well, not all of us are actors showcased in action movies. Sometimes during free practice, kata, teaching, or otherwise, it can feel like it. What was your greatest superstar moment specifically related to martial arts? That is the question.
That's
and
a
since
great
I
question.
asked it, I don't have to answer it first. So, do you have a superstar moment related to martial arts?
I have a few, but the one I'm going to do involves both of my co-hosts here, both Hachi Legacy and and Sensei Dauphin. And that is the first time I did a demonstration at the Matsumura Challenge. You'll remember, right, that I was doing a solo Iaido demo at the Matsumura Challenge, and I don't know how many people were sitting on the bleachers, 200-300, I don't know. And it was a really quiet demo. And at the last kata I did, I put a ki in there, and it was so cool. I did my cut ki, and everybody in the bleachers went whoop, boom.
I remember that.
I felt pretty powerful in that moment. So that was one of my superstar moments.
How about you, Sense Legacy? I can think of a bunch because I witnessed them. So you got to come up with something, or I'm going to start telling your tale.
Honest to God, I can't. Honest. I'm just an ordinary guy. That's how, and I don't want to sound like I'm being humble, but I don't have any. Everything I did was as hard as I could all the time.
Okay, how about you tell the story, Sense Legacy, about when Hanshi Hines was watching you fight, and I think you might have been a green belt in the room, and you timed that guy on a jump spinning back kick, and what Hanshi Hines said to you after you did that technique.
Okay. Yeah, that will prove what I said is not baloney. Well, I was fighting with this guy. I was a green belt, and he was a black belt. I did a jumping, spinning back kick, hit the guy in the chest, knocked him on his ass, and landed in my stance. And after I was getting changed, I walked out of the change room, and he looks at me, and he never said anything to anybody. He was a scary guy. He goes, Legacy. I said, I didn't even think you were good, let alone that good.
Nice.
That was it. I don't know. I don't know. That's an
About the
exciting.
time you hit the heavy bag, Sensei, and it's just like,
Well, those are
yeah,
weird.
I know, but that's stuff you see in movies, right? Like what you just described is what everybody sees happen in a movie and think it can't happen in real life.
Well, I hit a front bag with front bag. I hit a heavy bag with a front kick at the university, and there were like 50, 60 students there, and it flew off of its anchor, like what it was hanging on, hit a wall about 4 or 5 feet away. And we looked at the chain, and it had stretched out of shape. But let me tell you, how many people have hit that bag before me? You know, it was
Maybe
just,
it was a brand new bag, huh, Chan? Nobody had ever hit it before.
no, I doubt it very much. Like, hey, Randy's just picking at stuff because I don't really do anything really spectacular. Just normal, as best I can.
So I just disagree with Sense Legacy's. There's nothing normal about his martial arts, mostly because I've fought him a bunch of times and he's beat the tar out of me. More, I've laid at his feet, not on my stomach bowing, on my back staring at the ceiling more times than any other human on the face of the earth has knocked me down like that. So, and I've seen him do it to many, many people, and many of the guests we've had on have also echoed my comments.
All right, Randy, have you had a superstar moment in martial arts that you'd like to share with us?
So if everybody will indulge me, I'll do two. So I remember at the Matsumura Challenge one time, again, this is a dojo owner that you know, Sensei Suino, so I won't mention his name. But he came to the Matsumura Challenge and he brought like a couple of his black belts, and I was standing there with Sensei Legacy, and Sensei Legacy said, "Oh, thanks for coming to our tournament. Like, hope we can count on you to do some refereeing." And this asshole goes, "We're not here to referee. We're here to kick ass and win this tournament." And I was like about 27 or 28 at the time. And I was like, "You motherfucker, you're going to find out. Like, you're going to find out." And wouldn't chance have it that in the final match, I was fighting that guy. I was fighting him. And so my superstar moment was I got up on him 4-0, and I set up a certain technique, and it was an inside crescent kick. And I smacked that guy in the side of the head with an inside crescent kick as hard as I could, because I didn't care if I won the tournament or not. I wanted to make him pay a price. he literally cartwheeled out of the ring, like his feet went over his head and he landed out of the ring. And the 200 or 300 people who were there went, oh, like collectively. And Sensei Bill Adams was the center referee. And he said, so they said, stop. The guy eventually, they got him back in the ring. And Sensei Adams looked at me and goes, man, Randy, that was a great kick. You know what we're going to do to you now, right? I said, yes, Sensei. And he said, judge's call. And 5 red flags went up and I got disqualified. And that was my my moment. Right?
Superstar moment.
But I did get a superstar moment where you were both in Levy. I got a superstar moment where I got to get called up on stage. Hanchitarian at the evening show called up everybody who had won a world championship. And I got to stand on the stage with, you know, Ben Ledesor, Daryl Hennigan, like all these people. And my idol and my hero, Jean-Yves Thériault, was literally standing like shoulder to shoulder with me. And after he said, I didn't know you won a world championship, Randy. And I said, champ, I don't really talk about that. That happened a long time ago. And he goes, I'm not surprised though, because you're fucking good.
Nice.
And I was like, oh man, I felt like a superstar when that guy says that to you. You're like, you know, you're trying to be humble, but inside you're like, right. Benson's
Good
on
to hear.
the call.
Good evening,
Hey,
everybody.
Benson.
Sorry I
Welcome.
was so late. It went late shooting tonight, and thanks for holding it down. And I just realized that we're doing a host chat. So as much as I'm sorry to be late for it, I'm glad I didn't miss our guest. So happy to be here finally.
Well, he
Yep.
had some car troubles. So August, for those are watching, Grandmaster Speakman wants to be on. He's going to be on. It'll be in August.
So cool.
And Sean, what we did was we had a few questions we kicked around among ourselves, and then we've been asking our audience for questions. We have a whole bunch of questions that we're going to be teeing up.
Amazing.
And so we're working our way through them. And I think let's roll forward. I'm going to ask you this question first.
Okay.
This comes from one of our former guests, super fan Al Panacchia, Sensei Al Panacchia.
Hey, Sensei.
He has 2 questions, but I'm going to ask the first one, and then we'll revisit some other folks and come back. He says, besides Hanchi's book and my book, my books, what recommendations do you have? General books, biographies, etc., martial arts books. Maybe riff off a couple and why you're recommending them, and then we'll go around the horn on it.
What a great question. Oh my God, I'm just going to say what I think is the most spiritual book in the whole mix that changed my thinking completely. And Hanchi Legacy, you once gave me a copy. I have it signed. Jonathan Livingston Seagull. I read that book every year and a half. I've actually got little shivers going up the base of my spine right now. No spoilers, but there's the working young bird. Okay, I'm going to spoil the shit out of it. And that really related to me, trying to learn how to punch, trying to learn how to kick, but also trying to learn how to live. But then by the time the older birds shimmer and show up elsewhere, I mean, I just even rewatched Return of the Jedi with Mark Hamill, and there's aspects of that book in that movie. And that movie's a little divisive, but people who love it, love it. And I just kept seeing Jonathan Livingston Seagull in it. I don't think I've ever let go of the belief that we have the ability to transcend an aspect of our bodies. I don't know if we'll find it in our lifetime. I don't know what it is, but that book opened me up to anything's possible. And reading that at age 18, when I'd come from such a science or like classic literature background that's pretty mired, and it was life-changing. So I think I'll just leave it there. I don't want to riff and ramble too much. I will say this, and this isn't a sober pitch because everybody out there should smoke and drink what suits them. The Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous is also one of the most spiritual books ever written. Whether you ever care to get sober or not, the path for living that those steps outline, it's all about personal responsibility and being of service. And so many of our martial artists come on and they talk about like, you got to own your shit, get good, and then give back. So it's not quite a martial arts book, but I wouldn't be sober if it weren't for martial arts. And then the Big Book Alcoholics Anonymous flung me forward into a world where satisfaction doesn't necessarily come from what I'm getting, but from what I'm giving.
Man, there's some synergy here. Literally last night in class while teaching, I quoted Jonathan Livingston Seagull. So crazy that you would bring it up on the spot like that. Hunchy Legacy, besides your book and my books and Jonathan Livingston Seagull, what book or books would you recommend?
Well, I just want to say, as he said, I don't know why, but I was writing Livingston, as you said, Jonathan Livingston Seagull, and I had already written Jonathan. Okay. I would suggest, and Randy's going to know, I would suggest that you read, it's discontinued, but it's The Weaponless Warrior by Richard Kim. Mainly for beginners, because if you want to get in on the history, Master Kim had this way of writing that it's a little bit like Robin Hood, adventurous. And they're not like 285 pages. They're just like 5 or 6 or 7 pages of a person's life or a certain part of a person's life. And it's so enjoyable. I think that's what made me gripped, liking the history and philosophy and such. He's written a couple of other books, but if I was going to suggest one, you're going to have to pay for it, because they've went from, when I bought one that's 17 or 15.95 or something, to like some people are selling them for over $100. But if you look and try to find used ones, that's The Weaponless Warrior by Richard Kim. You'll like that. And even young people, say someone who can read and understand, read that book, they'd really enjoy it, because it creates a lot of heroes like Robin.
Hachi, you turned me on to those books, The Weaponless Warrior and The Classical Man. And it was so cool to read, because the ideas were so compelling, but also the stories that Sensei Kim told so many of the stories were about things that took place in Yokohama, in the same neighborhood that I lived when I was there. So it was, talk about the hair going up on the back of your neck. While reading that book, I'm like, I walked up and down that hill that he's talking about, this fight took place on or whatever. So that was a really cool historic moment. Randy, besides Hunchy's book and my books, what book would you recommend for people in the world of martial arts?
Man, there's so many. Like I'm a fairly tenacious reader. I love history. I went to school for history. I love philosophy. So after you read Jonathan Livingston Seagull, you should read Illusions, Memoirs of a Reluctant Messiah, and also amazing book by Richard Bach. And if you want to know the premise of it, it's about the Messiah doesn't want to be the Messiah, so he's going to train another person to do it, and it's going to take him about 2 weeks to do it, he says, to become the next Jesus Christ. And it's just, there's so much great philosophy and about the baggage of our mind and how it limits us. It's a really good book. There's all the classics, Zen Flesh, Zen Bones, Go no Sen. Those are books that everybody should read. The Book of Five Rings by Musashi. I'm also a big fan of the Bubishi. I think Hanshi McCarthy and Hanshi Alexander have both written versions of the Bubishi, and I think they're both worth a look, especially if you're into Okinawan martial arts and Okinawan karate history. Major Morgan, Living the Martial Way, is a really good book. If you've never read that, he's a martial artist who also was in the US military, and he just talks about the way you should live your life as a martial artist and training and in general. But the two most recently that I think everybody should read would be Anko Itosu, The Man, the Master, the Myth. It's a very big book and it's a very deep read, but it's really good about the politics of the time in Okinawa and in Japan and globally, and why things were happening. And it really sheds a light on how prominent Itosu was, not just as like a karate teacher, but as a political figure. He is very connected to Jiraiya no Kano, like just very, very innovative. Like when you read that book, you leave it with a much different understanding of who Itosu was. I also read Kaien Shitoku, The Man and His Art, which is another one by Hanshi McCarthy. Really good book. Both of those people are students of Matsumura. You leave that book understanding what a badass Kaien Shitoku was, how tough and rough and how willing he was to get in there and do it, and how even all the other masters were a little bit like, okay, like don't mess with Master Shitoku. Like if you mess with him, you're gonna be in for it. So those are the ones I rhyme off, and I have hundreds of books in my collection, and they're all good.
That you mentioned in the course of that, you mentioned the Book of Five Rings, Miyamoto Musashi, and we have a question come in about that. But before we turn to that question, I know Sean wanted to chime in one more book idea. So please go ahead with that, Sean.
Yeah, I'm going to make this one quick. Sensei Dauphin gave you this book, A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle. I've never, ever even approximated a better ego deconstruction. And also he talks about how to, because, you know, you read sometimes we have to shed our ego. We have to shed our ego. This is literally a map to do it. He did sessions with Oprah for a year, whatever you think of her or that. Anyways, I could go on at length, but A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle. That's the one I initially couldn't remember. And that to me is just,
Man, as each of you, we could go on, we could just list books all night. So maybe we'll do a great books episode because I got so many more. So let's do that. But meanwhile, we had a question come in from the love of my life, badass pioneer woman, mother of my kid, Pamela Swino, recent Nidan in Kodokan Judo. And she mentions that Musashi stresses the need to study both ways, Bunbu Ryodo, the pen and the sword, but he says one of the principles is become acquainted with every art. So Pamela asks, what arts, let me tee this up. I know most of these answers, so I'm gonna let you guys go first. What arts do you think he may have been acquainted with? I know all of us have studied a little Miyamoto Musashi. You for sure, Randy. What arts do you think Miyamoto Musashi may have been acquainted with?
Oh man, that's a great question.
Right?
Besides the sword,
Mhm.
right? I know he used wood weapons, so I know he used boken wood swords, but I think often those wood swords weren't necessarily wood swords. I think they might have been a stick that he picked up, or so definitely that. I know there's a lot of mythology about his first fight when he he had a battle with somebody when I think he was 14 or 15, and he fought a grown up, and people want to romanticize that, but he actually didn't use a sword in that fight. He was known to be a big person, and he put the person on the ground and smashed his head in with a rock is what so I know he knew he was acquainted with using a rock. But also he came from he's in the samurai class, right? So he came from he would have had some indoctrination with hand-to-hand combat and jujitsu. He would have inevitably other weapons, naginata, Halliburton, Kyudo. He would have had some understanding of all of that. Probably sumo, some understanding of sumo. I believe those would be the ones that he would have had some understanding of.
Fair point. Hanshi Legacy, of what you know of Miyamoto Musashi, do you know any other arts he was acquainted with other than the sword?
He faced them all. He had 60 fights and never lost any, except he said to Genosuke when Genosuke touched him with the tip of his stick, just touched his uniform, he said to him, I consider myself defeated, just because somebody had actually touched him. And before that time, the samurai only had one sword. And he went away, I think, for 6 years. And he came back with two swords, the wakizashi and the katana. And that's where the second sword entered. He drew the long sword to cut. And when Genosuke went to block with the stick, he pulled the little sword out and held it at his throat and said, I'm not going to kill you. by the way, he's the only guy he didn't kill. I'm not going to kill you because you once defeated me, and I'm going to let you go. Like the greatest,
Next level.
yeah,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
like everybody. If you're going to look at an apex, he will be standing on the top.
Yeah, yeah. Everybody else is playing checkers and he's playing chess.
Yeah. Also, another thing is, whereas he had no ego when he was retired, he was in the garden with his wife, and these three guys had come from somewhere and wanted to get a name for themselves. So the leader of those three guys went in there and challenged him. He said, "Look, I'm retired. I'm just in here working on my garden. I don't want to fight you guys. These are probably too good, and you would just defeat an old man, and you wouldn't get anything from it." So they went away and went back to the little village that we're in and started telling everybody how Miyamoto Musashi had backed down from him. And everybody laughed at him, right? Everybody was,
Of course they
and they
did.
became more embarrassed. So they went back and they said, no matter what you say this time, we're gonna beat the shit, kill you, or you're gonna have to fight. So he reached over and picked up a stick and he brained the first guy right through a helmet. He killed him. And then the other guy came and he turned around, he killed him too. And the third guy ran away. And that's how come we know that story. There's always one guy who gets away.
Wow.
He is the epitome of doing it now or at the time when it was the greatest weapon on earth, right? The master of masters.
That's why he's famous. Sean, any insights into other martial arts or other arts that Musashi practiced?
I don't have any sensei. I'd be listening. I mean, I know he was a poet and a calligrapher, so that's really important to me. I think artist being the second word in this is as important to me as the martial part. I've lived my life as an artist, and when I see that in someone who's that hallowed, I feel a little kinship. You know, I chose to live off grid, and in any case, so I think of that, but I couldn't read his poetry to you. I haven't read it.
Yeah, well, a very accomplished calligrapher and visual artist. So there are many famous ink drawings by Musashi. At the recent JMAC 18th anniversary celebration, the students pooled their money and bought a reproduction scroll of Musashi's painting of a Shrike on a stick looking down, and it's a really cool thing that evolved since then. Musashi is, of course, my legend sword hero, right? So I was really flabbergasted to get that scroll in the first place. But then one of our friends in Tokyo, Lance Gatling, does a lot of research in this area, and he had actually written a treatise on the meaning of that scroll. And although it looks like this peaceful scene with this bird on a stick, there's actually a lot more to it. And of course, it was painted by a martial artist, maybe the best martial artist the world's ever known. So that when you read deeply into that scroll, it's a great history. I shared that treatise with the JMAC people, and I will share it with the Punch Kick Choke Chat people as well. Really interesting read. I've sort of commandeered the flow here. If everybody's okay with that, I'll keep rolling the questions out. There's a big question from Kaylee that I want to get to and leave a little bit of space at the end for. But before we get to that, I want to mention that another super fan, Sensei Sam Maletsky, sent in a question. And it's really more just a comment than a question. He asked about whether I had trained with Yamaguchi Sensei in Vegas in the 80s, and I had. And then he said he had trained with Yamaguchi Sensei in Toronto through Sensei Ron Yamanaka, who we mentioned earlier in connection with Hanshi's Godan exam. And then Maletsky Sensei said he spent the break in Toronto outside with Yamaguchi Sensei smoking cigarettes. And that's 100% true. Sensei loved his cigarettes, and he would always get in trouble on seminars because he was a very disciplined man. But when when the reins were loosened and Kie, his wife, was at home, he might have had more cigarettes and whiskey than he probably should have. And so he'd get a raft of shit when he went home from his wife. But yeah, Yamaguchi Sensei enjoyed a cigarette and conversation. And one of the things that was always remarkable about him, because he was a guy that, you know, for the last, I don't know, 30 years of his life, trained Iaido and Kendo 2, 3, 4 times a day, 6 or 7 days a week. And he also smoked cigarettes, so he had 0 body fat. And so, you know, the guy was 5'4", if that, and had forearms and calves the size of watermelons, and they were just, he was cut like a bodybuilder. It was extraordinary to see him, you know, change with his shirt off. Yeah, because Hanchi, you probably remember that too as well, right?
Yeah, he loves 5 Star whiskey. He likes
Yeah, right.
He
Yeah,
once leaned over to get a bottle, and he was wearing, you know, those little garters that hold your socks up. He just leaned over to reach the ball, and I looked down. His leg was that long. His calf was like that big around. It was almost unreasonably proportionate. You know, it was
yeah.
massive.
Yeah, well, there's nobody else on this call with incredible anatomy, Hanchi. You're built like a karate man. It's awesome. All right. I want one more question from superfan Al Panacchia, and then I want to turn to Kaylee's question to make sure we give it its fair share of time. Big Al says, can you talk about the lengths of different weapons? The bow, the Joe, Boken, Shinai, Hambo, etc. I'm sure you guys have insights into weapons that are more commonly used in Kobudo and Okinawan Kobudo. I will just say this, that right, the classic is the Rokushaku bow, 6-foot bow. Joe is typically around 4 feet, and a Boken can range, but sort of the average one that people buy around JMX between about 38 and 41 inches overall. Randy, are there some weapons lengths that you can refer to in answer to Big Al's question?
Well, I mean, you mentioned them all. The only other thing I would add on to that is for some of the weapons like Tonfa or Sai, it's not like a standard length that has to be, it's for your body, right? So when you're holding a Tonfa, you want it to cover like the whole length of your forearm and not be sticking out like 7 feet from the end of it. And that's actually the same with Sai, right? Because when you turn a Sai around to block with it, you don't want it to be like in the middle of your forearm and you're trying to block like a bladed weapon and they go below it and you lose your arm anyway, right? So some of those weapons, the Okinawan weapons, are not necessarily a standard length. They're the length for your body. They're more customized.
Hanchi, anything to add on this topic?
Yeah, I'd say normally they would be 1 inch longer than your own arm. And in the words of Richard Kim, or most people when they fought in those days, that you always take care of the weapons that can be thrown. Therefore, they have a longer length. Say you have the size, you can throw those. So they're a little bit longer. You have to take care of those people first because they can get you from anywhere.
Fair point. Sean, anything to add?
I have something it's tangentially related. There's nothing I could say about the length of weapons that I wouldn't just be repeating my senseis. But I used to lifeguard, and we had a mantra called talk, throw, reach, row, go, tow, carry. And it was to keep yourself safe as a lifeguard. And I was motorbiking around the other day and I was like, this is actually really effective for a fight ladder. You know, like try and talk, throw, so you're staying away, reach, now you're getting closer, talk, throw, reach, like row, go, tow, carry, now you're getting into grappling. So it's a little unrelated to weapons, but it does include distance and length. So I'll just leave it at that. But that is a lifeguard way that you always try and stay as far away as you can while rescuing so that you don't get into trouble by being gloved under by somebody. You know, the guy who jumps in the water immediately, there could be an electrical current from a downed wire that you don't see. So I think about that in relation to fighting and safety. And when Hanchi was just talking about throwing a weapon, you have to deal with that person before you deal with the one who's holding a stick. I really like that. All life-saving of ourselves tends to relate.
That's an interesting point of view. Love it. Love it. Love it. Listen, we have 19 minutes, and I know we're going to do a wrap up at the end. And I know hopefully, Sean, you'll be able to remember the list of the folks that we need to thank. So I want to dig into a question that I think is going to take a little bit more time here. This comes from Kaylee Dida, who started training in judo as a kid at JMAC, maybe even before. I'm not quite sure, but with other members of her family, I've known Kaylee for a long, long time, and she's an intrinsic part of the greater JMAC family. Kaylee says, "Are all people capable of mastery at something? If not, why? And if so, what do you suppose prevents most people from achieving mastery?" Randy, you look like you're ready to start on this one. So why don't you kick us off, and then we'll go around with it.
My answer is no. Not everybody is capable of mastery. And the reasons why are, there's so many, like there could be so many reasons for that. Could be where you live. Like it might not even be your fault. You could just be literally in the middle of nowhere. And so you have no access to good teaching. You have a deep desire, but you're never going to master that thing so that could be a reason. It could be you're just deficient in some area that requires mastery, like mentally deficient, physically deficient. You don't have the intestinal fortitude to take yourself to the places that you need to. And listen, I'm saying this all from a place of, I don't consider myself to have mastered any of the arts that I'm doing. I'm still on the path of mastery, but I don't believe everybody can master something. That's why not everybody is a black belt, and not everybody is a 10th Dan, and not everybody ever will be. Some people cannot meet the standards. They just can't, sadly.
Yeah, fair enough. It's a dose of reality. Sean, what do you have to say about this? Are all people capable of mastery at something? Because you're more known than the rest of us to talk about other things in life than martial arts when you answer. If not, why? And if so, what do you suppose prevents most people from achieving mastery?
It's interesting because, Sensei Dauphin is my teacher, and I'm just listening to what he just said. So I want to have a caveat of processing something my teacher just said, because I really hung on every word. My gut said yes. And again, I'm going to go a little tangential, like that idea that, if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it'll seem like a failure. And I think, therefore, that the second part of the question is the most important. What prevents most people from achieving a mastery? Exiting the paradigm in which they can never be one. If somebody wants to be a master, then their life's purpose has to be exiting any paradigm in which it's impossible, and then finding what that is. And if the mastery is literally just nobody in the world is better at walking this path, drinking from that water, and walking back, does that matter? Is that something you can master? I don't know. But these things are all sort of constructs anyways that we've put together and said that here's a classical martial art, here's physics. It adds up. And we do know something like physics would re-show itself in 1,000 years if we burned all the books, and so would martial arts. Would walking to that river and back matter? I don't know. But if you wanted to be a master of that, you just have to deal with the scorn of everyone going, that's bullshit, that's lame, that won't pay you a salary, that won't lead to growth for your shareholders. And you go, it's not important. This is what I've mastered, and this is what I'm dedicated to. And so in that sense, I think everybody needs to look at their paradigm and go, am I going to get the scrolls in this? Or am I going to go find the thing in which I can write the fucking scrolls?
Interesting. Hachi, where do you go with this? Is everybody capable of mastery at something? If not, why not? If so, what do you suppose prevents most people from achieving mastery?
I have a different take on it. I'm not sure I'm right, but I figure the person who created us, all gave us capability of becoming something. So I wouldn't say no, and I can't say yes because I agree with Randy that the no may be grounds that you may have somebody who lives in the desert and uh, can never really reach, say, being a martial arts master, and that was going to be his or her path. So there, in that way, I could say no. I feel that everyone has been giving a gift for something. Um, the other thing is the greatest thing you have to overcome is laziness. You have to overcome yourself. That's the greatest thing that, say, martial arts gives you. Once you overcome that laziness and you find your goal and you get on that route and you get your eye on it, it's laziness that stops you. It's because you have all the equipment that was given to you by the creator who wanted to be for you to be successful. So that's
I
why
like that.
like it. Just imagine if Randy's an intelligent guy, but if he say he had his mother would have prevented him from taking martial arts, he would have done something else, but he may not have been as great in those things, maybe because besides history, than being a martial artist. And that's clearly in my mind, that's his path. And he's making me a greater sensei because it is now my job to make somebody better than myself. And he's there or well on his way of doing that.
Randy, I know you wanted to chime in on this. Why don't you weigh in a little bit more before I opine?
Yeah, so when we talk about mastery of something, I think we need to talk about things that are of consequence, right? Not like I mastered tying my shoes a long time ago. They never come undone when I tie them. Right? Like I just got to be honest about this, right? So I'm talking to Kaylee here. Like, so yeah, everybody can master something, but is it of consequence? Like, is it a calling? Right? Is it something that, you know, I believe I was called to martial arts, that this was my destiny. I was supposed to be a martial artist. And you know, whatever. I always wanted to be a martial artist. Some people stumble on their destiny, but you know, when we're talking about mastery, it shouldn't be trivial, right? Like, okay, somebody can be a world champion of skipping rocks across a pond. Like, there's value to that person, and he could be the best rock. He or she can be the best rock skipper on the face of the earth. And if that brings them joy, that's great. They've mastered something. I'm just not sure that the world is going to value that gift quite as much as an actor, a martial artist, a poet, an athlete, a politician, like things that have the potential to change lives and change the world. Not everybody is going to master those types of activities. I don't believe it. Some people might want to, and they might stay in it for their entire life, and they will not master it. And I feel like I know this because I've seen people in an endeavor try their whole life, have access to things, and die and not master it. So I just believe that not everybody can master something. And if we're talking about like tying your shoes or eating food, yeah, I mostly get all the food in my mouth every time and swallow it. And I'm pretty good at that. As good as anybody else on the planet.
I've seen you miss a couple.
Yeah. And everybody has, but I've mastered it at the same level as everyone else.
So I like that idea that the thing that we're talking about has to have consequence. Clearly, if we're going to be recognized as a master, there has to be a community of people that value that thing, right? And probably if that's the case, in order to be a master, you have to be better than a lot of people at it, which means it's also a difficult endeavor, right? So it has to be valued by your society. It has to be a difficult endeavor before we can call it mastery. And then the added context that I think we probably can all agree on is that the process of getting there has to change you in some way. that it has to be difficult and long enough that you aren't the same person in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, having gone through that process of mastery. Now, all of us on this call are realistic enough to know that we're down a path of ways, but there isn't a final destination, right? None of us are going to say, I've reached it, mastery is achieved, over and out. But we're probably better at our chosen endeavors than most people in the world. And some people would call us masters. I certainly wouldn't call myself a master. I don't necessarily hold that out as being more valuable sort of universally than the guy who learns to skip rocks. My facetious way of saying that is I think God loves those people too, right? I'm just being funny when I say that, but I mean, I really don't know, right? I don't know who God loves better. I don't know who's going to change the universe more. People that reach mastery in martial arts, people that reach mastery in business, people that reach mastery in Zen, or people that learn to skip rocks. I don't know. I suspect that if it meets those criteria I mentioned, and probably some others that I haven't thought of, I suspect that if it meets the criteria of being valued by the society you're in, being difficult to achieve, and being a long, difficult process that changes you as a human being, hopefully in a positive direction, that it probably does have a little more consequence to the universe. But that's my opinion. I don't really know. When I talk to God, he doesn't give me such clear answers. He gives parables and I have to figure it out for myself.
So you wouldn't say that the creator was a master because he couldn't make us all worthwhile human beings in that sense.
Well, I guess the question is, what was the goal, right? Was it to make us all worthwhile human beings, or was it to lay something out and give people a challenge, right? Or, maybe there were 7 elements and they were cast out and left to their own devices so that, we could see how it goes, and here we are. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the creator had in mind.
Sensei Sweeto, do you mind if I throw one at you?
Yeah, go for it.
What's a master if not you? I mean, if we accept there is mastery,
Mm-hmm.
and I understand that you don't feel or own that, but what would a master be if not you?
Remember was it Rick Ellis that was on our show that used the word artisan, or was it somebody in our show in recent months used the term artisan to describe somebody who's really good at their craft, who now, like, their expression is the art itself, right? I would probably be more comfortable with the title of artisan. Somebody who is really immersed in it, who now, when I'm on the dojo floor doing Iaido, it's really a clear, true expression of the art. I would accept that. I think my problem with the word master is it implies the end. And I also don't like the sort of master servant echoes that goes with that. Forgive me if you study a martial art like Taekwondo that uses the term master or grandmaster. Those are fine in that context, but it doesn't sit comfortably with me. I don't like the idea that I'm a master. I like the idea that I'm an artisan. Somebody's in pursuit of the craft at a very high level.
I think I like that because that's what Jonathan Livingston Seagull is about. When he was given a choice at the end to come back and get better, or to quit as a master and go into heaven or whatever it is. So I think that deals with that, Jonathan Livingston Seagull, whether you're ever finished learning or not. So I sort of go along with that.
I think it's all relative to your experience too, right? Like, I don't think the Buddha would say, I'm the master, even though they are. That's something that other people look at you and call you. If somebody says, I'm the master, I'm going to get away from them as fast as I can. Right? People didn't bow down, they don't bow down at people's feet because the person demands it. It's because they earned it. That's why they're called master. It's relative, right? And one person's master will be like master instructor of something, will not even be in the realm for another person, right? Like, if you walk in a dojo and you've have no martial arts experience, you've never been, and like there's a really good third degree black belt, you're gonna be like, holy shit, this person is the shit. And they're gonna put that on you. They're not gonna take it on themselves,
Right.
in my opinion.
It, an art is something that only needs to be 90% that works for you 90% of the time, 9 out of 10. Perfection does not work. So nobody can ever be perfect. Imagine, I said this before too. Imagine a pitcher who can only throw strikes and a batter who can only hit home runs. When the pitcher lets go of the ball, what's going to happen? Yeah. So being a master is somewhere around 90%. Nobody ever gets to know everything. And then only God or the great one, if there is one, can do that. Because we, in that way, don't understand what being perfect is. Doesn't work for us.
And let's also remember, master and mastery are two different things.
Yeah. Well,
Having mastery of something is much different than saying he's the master, right?
yeah. Again, you only need, you can't know everything. Nobody can. So
I always think mastery for me is taking something that is extremely complex that not most people could do or achieve and making it look like anybody could do it. Right? To me, that's a level of mastery. You know, you watch Sensei Suino. I've had people come in and watch me do Iaido and they say, "Oh, that doesn't look so hard. I think I could do that." And I'm like, "You couldn't even put the uniform on." Like if I threw all the equipment there and said, "Get dressed," you do it all wrong. You wouldn't even be able to do that right.
that is
Hanshi
funny.
Legacy, you know, years ago, you talked about a mokuso as like watching a bird fly off a branch, and the absent bird is the clear mind, or a flame go out. I can tell you right now, I'm going to be using the idea of the perfect pitcher throwing to the perfect batter, and that space in between as my meditation and my mokuso for a little while. That's a beautiful. I've never thought about that. Thanks for that.
Amazing. Somehow, as always, the time has flown by, maybe even more rapidly than usual. Sean, I'm so glad you were able to join us there toward the last bit. This has been a really fun chat. At least I've loved it. If the rest of you have not, then sucks to be you, because I'm having a great time. Hanshi, any final words?
No, it's it's funny how time flies when you're actually having a good time, right? That's what this ended up being, a good. Great to be with you guys as always. After 4 years, I almost forgot to be here today because I enjoy it so much.
Love it, love it. Randy, final words?
Yeah, on that note, since we're on that topic of like just enjoying these things, I'm sure other martial artists on this have this, but we really are sharing something with everybody that's, up until we started this, was very private and very personal. This is not uncommon that the four of us would be somewhere having a meal and talking and asking questions like this. Maybe we're not getting prompted like we are tonight, but it would be just as easy for somebody to give us 10 questions and the four of us to sit at somebody's table and eat and talk like this for 3 hours, right? Which I think is very special. Again, it goes back to what I said at the beginning. Having solid relationships where you can be vulnerable, risk making a mistake with an answer with the people that are around you, and they're still going to get on the show with you next week. They're going to think it was a stupid answer, and they're going to tell you, hey, you said this and it was dumb, but we're still going to get in there and get back to it again. So I love doing this.
Sean, I'm going to kick it over to you to wrap it up for us. But the last thing I want to say on that topic is, I don't know, the second or third time I went up to St. Thomas to teach Iaido, and afterwards we were out having a a little food and beverage. And I remember driving home with whoever was with me at the time in the car, and I go, man, those guys like talking about martial arts. It hasn't changed in 35 years. Amazing. What do you got,
There's
Sean?
probably a Grim Reaper that was with you.
Yeah,
he
probably so.
Quite a bit in the beginning.
Yeah.
Well, the first thing is for everybody watching, next week's our McDojo episode, and we're basically going to look at we want you to send clips in because we can't wait to watch these and do some breakdowns on some stuff out there that makes claims that maybe can't be verified by anyone else but in the room drinking the Kool-Aid. So we're really excited about that episode. I just want to say, going back to this topic, yeah, like I love my life as an artist and my career. I really do. But it's not this. Like when I rush home from set, rip off my wardrobe, set up my computer, turn on, Sensei Dauphin's chatting as the computer flips up. Like my central nervous system just goes, it's home, it's family, it's the best thing in my life other than literally my wife. There's nothing else that I would rather be doing, and my career sustains me, but this is like oxygen versus, it's beautiful. Anyways, I just want to say how much I love these host chats and how much we're doing as we get into these second 100 eps. That's all I got to say is I can't wait to do this show with y'all next week. And Sensei Dauphin, I'll just throw it back to you because I don't like having the last word when I've been gone half the episode.
Okay, well, I'm going to send out some thanks before we sign off. And I want to say thanks to Robert Slumsky, Andre Sedchev, who's on the call tonight, Alden Adair, Sydney Dauphin, Justin Save, Mike Russell, Josh Kishins, Daniel Holland, Jesse Vile Vito, Cristiano Landau, and one that we don't thank enough, but who does a tremendous amount of work for the show, unknown, except Sensei Suino, is Emily Ruth Driscoll, who, if you're seeing the posts and a lot of the marketing that goes out, thank you, Emily. You're putting a huge effort in, and we really appreciate you doing that. So that's all I want to say. And yeah, Sensei Suino, Sean, we'll see you guys tomorrow at some point. And on Saturday, we'll be doing 12 hours of hard sweating and training and leveling up. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great one.
Thank you.